What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to 8 Cubes, the show where two of Marvel Snap's best players talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap, starting with Makkari, who is a 3/4. At the end of the turn, she will run to a random location, effectively kind of a 0/4. This is a card that was originally a 3 power card that was buffed very recently, seemingly in an attempt to make sure it ends up in a plausible spot. I think there's still a lot of doubt about it. Lamby, where are you landing with Makkari?
Yeah, when you say a lot of doubt is actually in my mind as well because I think this card, as much as free cards is good, like free sort of quote unquote 0/4 is great. I feel like this can really screw you over more often than it helps you, right? Because firstly, it sometimes just clogs you when you don't want to be clogged, right? And it's not like you're clogging with Makkari and it's like 9 or 10 power, you're clogging with 4. And sometimes, oftentimes, that's not enough. And also, there are times where it just runs into locations like Space Throne, Death's Domain, uh, all that kind of stuff. So I'm actually very down on this card. I don't think it's gonna be very good, but I would say though, like there are certain decks that can benefit from like a free 0/4. Like certain decks that don't actually get to play out all their cards in their hand. Sometimes you just want a random thing that just runs to a random location just because it's free. You only have 6 turns. You can't play out all your cards. So decks like that may find like Makkari to be decent, but for the most part, like I don't see her being that great.
I do think she feels like a bit of a natural fit for me in Silver Surfer, where Silver Surfer is a deck that already, to me, is actually pretty good. I think Silver Surfer, and we'll get to this later, is one of the better decks that plays Killmonger, which is an important thing to be right now. And I think that that is a reasonable start for a 3/3. Like, Silver Surfer is very often going to actually be interested in, oh, I just get this guy for free. She shows up. It's as good as it gets. A free thing that I buff with Silver Surfer. I'm interested in that. There are some potential ordering issues like, oh, I played Brood. She goes to my Brood lane. She goes to my Absorbing Man Brood lane. She goes to my Hope Summers lane. She clogs me up. But I do think that that is like one spot where I would actually be interested in trying her. Whereas in a lot of other decks, it's like, I mean, I guess I could Cersei this into a 4, but it's not like I'm going to be reliably getting her into the lane that I want her to get her into. And so I don't exactly know how to process this card. One note is at the end of the turn is when she triggers from hand. And I believe that should be like she's got a chance to go into locations like flooded locations and things like that. What I don't know is can she go into say a Crimson Cosmos? Like can she go is it all pure random? Can she go there? I don't know. She shouldn't be able to go. She doesn't have Jeff text, right? But can she go into storm locations? Can she go into Crimson Cosmos locations? Things like that are like things I actually really want to know because it might not matter the most, but it could end up actually mattering. And overall, I'm not sure this card is going to land, and I'm not sure it's possible for a card like this to land because it's balanced around being effectively free. And so it just can't be that good because if it is that good, we kind of run into trouble. So, Lamby, we are both fresh off of fairly long streams. The metagame right now, what is your overview of it? And there's already some topics on here, but they're honestly subject to change if you see anything that we got to change.
Right. So the first thing that I want to say is that Hela is like kind of going nowhere. It's still a dominant force in the game. It's so much stats still, right? Like people still play it for easy victories to climb to infinite, and I think rightfully so. It's still a very powerful deck in the game right now. The funny thing is, her sort of like nerf counterpart, which is Professor X, like he's actually disappeared. Like he's gone. Like I. I feel like the initial, like, I wouldn't say cope, but the initial attempts at like making like a Prof X Magneto deck, Prof X move silk kind of deck, like gone out the window. Like at least for now, like a lot of it has it's not been very efficient and effective. I do see a rise in like it's also one of the topics for later, but we do see a rise in Zoo. Might be also on the back of Gilgamesh, which we'll talk about later as well. But yeah, I do think I just want to say that like Hela is here to stay, and but at least we do see a change in the guard a little bit. Cannonball is actually very rarely played right now. I've seen very little Cannonball as well. So yeah, I'm optimistic. Outside of the fact that Hela is still like present, I'm actually quite optimistic to see where we can go with like the meta right now.
I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't think Hell is a problem. I just don't. It's fine. But unless you're discarding the Infinite, like if I'm Zoo, I feel very confident playing against Hela. Where it's like, unless you've discarded the Infinite, I'm just gonna have 20 points in every lane. Try and beat it. Like, Hela has taken a legitimate hit where if you're putting like, 25, 20, 15 on the board, you can just be like, yeah, I'm probably just winning this game. Like, I'm not always going to win this game, but my cope stays are now no longer coping. These are no longer cope stays, they are actual stays. And I think Hela, as a deck whose superpower was always people stay when they should leave, making some of those stays when they should leave into stays when they should stay is actually like a really meaningful hit to the deck. Like, I am not overly afraid of the deck right now. Feel free to clip this and then in 2 weeks when I'm complaining about it, throw it back in my face. That's entirely possible. Just the baseline power output of a deck like Zoo, which I honestly consider maybe not the best deck in the game, but like the baseline. Like, this is the deck a lot of people are going to be playing. It's very strong. And the fact that that baseline power level is so high and so consistent, I don't feel the pressure on me the same way with Hela, where Hela has to be meaningfully bigger than the things people are trying to do. It's still meaningfully bigger than Loki, and it'll still ruin a Loki player's day. But I don't know if it's meaningfully bigger than Zoo. I don't know if it's meaningfully bigger than Bounce. I don't know if it's meaningfully bigger than some of the Annihilus mid-range stuff. And that leaves me in a good spot, I think.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing also. Actually, two things. First thing is I'm actually quite excited for the first time in a long time to actually sign Zoo decks because I think like you're right. Zoo decks actually they're not like what they used to be, which we'll talk about in the next topic. And also one more thing that I forgot to mention was yeah, the Annihilus stuff, right? Because now Professor X doesn't really stop the void from shifting, correct? So
Right.
I actually think it's stonks up right now, and it's also the best Cersei deck. Just because your natural use case to Cersei avoid just makes it like a ton of stats. And also on that note, yeah, I do see a lot of Cersei in the meta.
Yeah.
Like it's not just Cersei Annihilus. I do see people doing things like Electro into Cersei as well, just to get rid of the Electro. It's actually very real. It's like what we used to do, right? Blink
Yeah.
Electro,
It's your
but now you
second blink.
Cersei Electro.
Yeah.
It's not like similar. Yeah, it's a similar context.
I do think that she's very much like an Annihilus card, but she's also like so clearly the best at that, where it's like, I think she just sort of slots into the Annihilus package, and it's like now it's the Annihilus Cersei package. Like, I just think that
Mhm.
that's what's going on with her. So, I mean, let's talk about Zoo. I think this is the best deck in the game. I do. I think this is just like it's a powerful point package that can afford to run multiple tech slots. You can use them either for defense like Kyera or offense like Red Guardian or Rogue or Shadow King. You have a very bounce-esque level of points with more ability to adapt to your opponent. The only real downside is it can feel a little bit clunky sometimes, where you're
Mm.
very locked into like 5 on 5, 5+1 on 6. But other than that, it's just like if you draw the right stuff, you're just going to be doing more points with a ton of interaction. And that's a really powerful place to put yourself in as a deck baseline. I think this is probably the best deck in the game. I know a lot of the top players are playing variations of it, tech for mirrors, tech for various other things, to the point that I built a deck, a Loki deck actually, specifically aimed at trying to beat Zoo because Loki's really good in the matchup, obviously. And so you end up in this spot where somehow I actually think, and I realize I have a history of Zootopia here. Like, I realize I cope a lot with Zoo, but I kind of think this is the best deck in the game. Just straight up. It's the points and interaction deck. It's doing amazing right now.
Yeah, so what I mentioned in the previous topic about like Zoo being very different from what it used to be, it's really and why I can actually sort of like echo your sentiments a little bit. Like I'm not so high on Zoo as you are, but I'm very high on the fact that a lot of these decks can play Mockingbird and like Sasquatch related things, plus that like Blue Marvel Gilgamesh, which is very
Mm-hmm.
powerful. Because like Zoo now is not just lots of little critters into like white buff, right? You go very tall as well. You have Car Obsidians, you have like cheap Mockingbirds, you have like finishers that are tall in like maybe the Gilgamesh or stuff like that. Like it's not just white, it's also tall. So I feel like I don't even know if I want to really call this zoo because like it's just lots of okay, it's like some little things that let you play tall things, you know, and that's a recipe for a good deck, right? And these tall things are actually quite cheap for their power level as well. So yeah, I guess yeah, sure, let's call it zoo. But I do believe that like the level of power of this deck is also like unprecedented right now because like you mentioned, the whole bounce thing, it's like I wouldn't say it's easier bounce, but I would say it's like less set up bounce, right? You just play
Yep.
the cards on the curve. Like you just play cards on curve and then you naturally curve into like a cheaper Mockingbird, a cheaper Sasquatch. A 410 like a Cow Obsidian if you choose to play that. Even Dazzler is also something to consider as well.
8
So
power.
I do think that this deck being able to go wide and tall, and you kind of can very easily transit to the tall game plan because stuff like Mockingbird is cheap, gives this deck quite a bit of flexibility right now.
Yeah, you're talking about like Mockingbird being cheap. Mockingbird is like very often free. Like Shauna
Free, yeah.
is -3 on that card. Shauna, for the record,
Mm.
that's like a 310, basically. In most scenarios, that's a 310 that discounts your Mockingbird by 3 and gives you a bunch of bodies to buff with Kazar and Blue Marvel. Like in a lot of scenarios, it's an extremely powerful card right now. So you have Shauna, whose power got doubled from 2 to 4. You have Mockingbird. You are the best deck at being a Mockingbird deck. She is free more in this deck than basically any other deck I've ever played. You have Gilgamesh, who is galactically huge. And people are going to be like, oh, this is about the buff. I don't think this deck is about the thing that makes this deck good. I don't think it's the 2 points on Gilgamesh. I think it's the 2 points on Shauna and the nerf to Profex Cannonball. Like, this is a deck that probably would have shown up even if they didn't nerf Profex Cannonball, or even if they didn't buff Gilgamesh once they nerfed Profex Cannonball, I should say. And they buffed Shauna and Gilgamesh, right? Like, this is a deck that was already probably fine, just overshadowed by better 5 drops. And now there's just not as much of a punish for filling up all your lanes anymore. It's not a thing that you're getting punished for in the same way. And suddenly it's just very, very difficult for a deck like this to like be beaten. It's just doing a ton of points in reasonable ways with real interaction. You can have your Kyera, you can have whatever tech cards you want. It's honestly very strong. So that brings us to Killmonger, who I think is going to see a resurgence, I think, because I expect Zoo to sort of trickle down in a real way. And that means that the instant people see Zoo, they're going to be like, it's time to Killmonger. So what I want to start here is say, Lamby, what do you think the best Killmonger deck is right now?
My head naturally gravitates towards destroy firstly because of the natural synergies with Killmonger and the entire destroy package, right? So I would do agree that like if we see more like zoo related stuff, like people actually play more destroy because it just has natural fits for Killmonger. Having said that though, Killmonger is also like a 3 cost card. So Surfer runs like okay, I wouldn't even want to call it Surfer tag. I would just say Surfer playing good 3 cost cards. And there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
There's like Red Guardian, there is Nocturne, Gladiators, even the Shaw, like the Brood, and maybe Makkari when it comes out. But like there's like just a lot of good 3 cost cards, and then and then Killmonger is one of them. So I think you could see realistically like Killmonger in a Surfer deck. But yeah, no, I actually still think Destroy would be a really good like deck to play on ladder right now. Also regarding the whole Killmonger thing, the Annihilus decks run demon, right? Like
Yeah.
they run the demon as well. So that's also one other target you can hit with Killmonger, which is super effective. It's a 1/6. And then like I mean Kitty Pride, once in a while you get to hit that as well.
I gotta tell you, I don't think it's Destroy. And
Okay.
I think it just has to be something else. I'm not positive what other thing it is. It could be Surfer, it could be like a Sarah Tech kind of Invisible Woman deck. I don't know. But I feel like Destroy just doesn't match up in the right ways. Like, you Killmonger some stuff, it's not going to win you the game unless you have the other stuff going as well. And I don't necessarily think that's like true at all levels. I think, against most players, they're probably just playing this stuff out on curve, but I think a good player will recognize what's going on and play to avoid being killmongered in a real way. And my issue with Destroy is that it feels like the only reason to play it is that Killmonger. Where if the only reason to play this deck is, oh, it's Killmonger and sometimes I have synergy with it, we can play the Annihilus Killmonger deck, right? We can do like the Deathbird Killmonger deck where we're playing like Annihilus and Cersei and Death and our own Squirrel Girl. We Killmonger a bunch of stuff. We play a free Death. We play a Mockingbird, that kind of thing. I feel like I would rather be doing Killmonger in a shell of cards that's good than Killmonger in a shell of cards that I'm only playing because they work with Killmonger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually forgot about the Deathbird deck because I think that might be the better one. Like I think like in the sense of what we are discussing right now, I do think the Deathbird one might be the better Killmonger deck because you also run your usual suspects of like your own Mockingbird and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And then you have your Death, which is like gonna be really cheap after your Killmonger. Yeah, I think that might actually be the better like consistent Killmonger deck, because like Destroy as much as yes, it has synergies with Killmonger, it's naturally way more inconsistent as a deck. So might be the Deathbird deck.
Yeah, I just feel like Destroy is like the most
Mm.
medium playable deck where it's like this is you can do it. Feel free. I just think you can probably do better with the Killmonger. And I don't know exactly how. I don't know if it's Surfer, I don't know if it's Deathbird, I don't know if it's like Sarah or whatever, but I feel like if you're going to be a Killmonger deck, you're going to want to be more than a Killmonger deck. And Destroy is very much a Killmonger deck and sometimes it combos you.
Surfer has Killmonger Nova though, so that might be one of the places you can consider playing like dedicated like Killmonger winning card. Like you
Yeah.
play Killmonger to win the game, plus you have Nova, and then there's Shaw as well, which is buffed. So
I think Surfer also has a kind of
Hmm.
reasonable matchup into the deck we're about to talk about next, which is Loki. So my fear is that we are entering a Loki meta. I am currently playing a Loki deck that I built to beat Zoo. And that means this is going to sound a little off the wall, but go with me on this. I'm playing Blink to turn my 3 costs into Loki on turn 5 because the only thing that matters in the Loki versus Zoo matchup is playing the card Loki. If you play the card Loki against Zoo, you're getting like 3-0 costs, and then if you have a Quinjet out, you're just playing your entire hand. Like, it's a very I found it more successful to try to beat Zoo by just playing Loki as many times as possible than by playing Killmonger. I was just straight up more successful doing this. And I do think that it is very possible we end back up in like a week of just like, okay, Loki is the thing to do right now. I think it's extremely possible.
that makes sense to me because when it comes to Loki, playing Killmonger in Loki actually has like no upside for yourself,
Yeah.
right? Because like at the end of the day, you're blowing up your own stuff, and like instead, why not just focus on Lokiing their stuff and get it cheaper and playing it? Like you get cheaper Blue Marvels, cheaper or possibly free Mockingbirds, and then yeah, that kind of thing. So I agree that when in the Loki deck, I think just like being able to play the Loki card and getting all their cheap stuff, it feels very like Loki versus Thanos esque, right? In the
Yeah.
past, like you get the cheaper Blue Marvel, cheaper
Yes.
Mockingbird. Even like to a certain extent, like the cheaper, sometimes even Kazaa if you play that, or even the Dazzler for 1 mana, which is crazy.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, I do think that's the direction we should go with Loki. But on that note, though, I just want to say that like maybe because I'm personally higher on Hela than like you, so I
Right.
feel like the Loki deck might be a bit kept in check because Hela's like an easy deck to play
Yes.
that does beat Loki. So it really depends on where the direction we go. Like I agree on the part that we're in the week to come we will see more Zoo, but I also don't think that like the Hela will go away that much because it's really just easily accessible and easy to play. And being easily accessible and easy to play vs Loki would be something that a lot of players would like to do as well. So and also on that note, Hela does have an insane matchup versus Surfer. I believe it's like
Yeah.
way more unfair into Surfer than other decks. So Surfer's a bit more fair. But yeah, and there's no tag in Surfer that really beats Hela, of course. So yeah, I think Loki stongs up, but my personal take is that I don't think it's gonna run rampant.
My worry with Hela is we have to go back to being a Corvus deck, right?
Yes.
And we are probably, I would think, playing Black Knight too. And so
Yes.
suddenly we are a deck that is no longer so easily obtainable. Like those are two series 4 or 5
True.
cards. And it's I it's not as free of a win into Zoo for sure. Because Zoo to
Yeah.
me is in like the like what I like to think of as the bounce role in the metagame, which is just the normal deck that does the most points. And it's so close to Hela's range that it is very punishing to play Hela against that deck unless you are discarding the Infinite and have like three other things in your discard pile. Like a lot of the rest of the time, Zoo is just going to be able to match you on points if they're doing what their deck wants to do. And so you end up in a very awkward spot, I feel like. And because we're a Corvus deck, there's more free losses back in the archetype. And because we're a Black Knight Corvus deck, it's a little bit less accessible. I do think Hela beats the crap out of Loki. I'm not going to sit here and argue that. It beats Loki's butt in, but I do think that it's almost like Zoo is protecting Loki right now, making it harder
A
to
little
play
bit,
a
yeah.
deck that beats it. So let's talk about Hela. Like, I feel like I played for like 5 hours and ran into like two Helas. And the Helas I did run into, like, Zoo is genuinely awkward, whereas you are just in love with her still. So tell me
Yeah.
why you love this card. Tell me what you've been doing in Zoo matchups. Tell me what matchups you're afraid of and what matchups you're excited about.
Honestly, I feel like people are not playing as much Hela now also because of the just natural sentiment of nerf equals worst card, right? Like obviously
It
it's a
is
worst card.
worse.
It's 100% worst card. Yeah, but like I think people are also not like giving it enough credit for the fact that it still puts a lot of points. Like your angle is that if you don't discard Infinite, it's like not enough points, right? But I think
Yeah.
I would like to disagree because I feel like honestly, if you discard like enough stuff, it doesn't actually specifically have to be the Infinite. If you discard enough big 6 cost cards, it's still a lot of power swing on the final turn as well. So, okay, having said that though, yes, it is a bit more risky because of the fact that it's now a Corvus deck for sure. But like, I think that the power spike is insane still with Hela, whether we discard Infinite or not. Obviously, Infinite is the high roll at this point in time. But yeah, so I'm actually quite high on Hela right now, and like we mentioned, it keeps the Loki decks in check.
Yeah.
It's close with Zoo for sure, because Zoo plays like 0 mana 9 power, like and then
Pretty
Blue Marble
good.
and Gilgamesh. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. So it's actually very close with Zoo right now. And but the thing is I don't actually believe that it's like that bad of a matchup for the Hela, or is it like
it's
actually difficult for Hela to beat?
it's not like bad. It's just like the point
It's
of
close.
Hela is
Yeah.
that the matchup shouldn't be close, right? Like that's
True.
you're playing it
True,
on
true.
the premise that you're bigger than every other deck and they can't interact with you, right? And Zoo really challenges that premise. Not just in terms of being like very large, but also like you're now playing a Black Knight, right? And Zoo is very often playing Shadow King. And that works
Mm.
now. And it's just like there's like a lot of challenges to the premise of why Hela is a good deck. And I still think it remains a good deck, but Zoo specifically feels like designed in a lab to challenge that deck and make it harder for it to be uncontested. Because if we ever go to a Hela meta, I feel like I'd be very comfortable just playing a Zoo deck into it. And that's never happened before. It's always been we're going to a Hela meta. I need to play something specifically to beat Hela. And I don't think that's necessarily true anymore.
Yeah, your last point actually makes a lot of sense. Like, as in, like, I think we can agree to disagree, but it's fine. But like, your last point actually makes a lot of sense, which is that there is a lot of decks now that can reliably just say, "I can beat turn 6 Hela," right? Like,
Yeah.
you can either beat or contest turn 6 Hela, and whether you win or lose or not, it's probably gonna be a bit close. Like, if
Yeah.
you can think that I can contest these 3 discards, and if even if you do lose, it's probably gonna be losing by a little bit, right? Not like just straight up getting blown out. So yeah, what they did with the Hela -2, I think was reasonable. Just that I mean, to me, it's still gonna be a good deck, but
Oh,
like,
yes.
I think it's a reasonable discount, reasonable nerf to the Hela card, and I think that's why we have room for other decks in the game right now.
Yeah, it's a good deck without question. And I do think that
Mhm.
if they didn't do that nerf, we would be entering a Hela meta right now, and we're not
Yes.
because they did that. So, one thing that's really stuck out to me is I can't seem to find a good Ravonna deck where you're just like this Ravonna Athena stuff. It was so powerful with Professor X, and I would think that like you could probably just take the old shell and maybe like put Iron Man and Claw in, and that would probably be fine. But I haven't found a compelling reason to do that instead of something like Loki, for example. And I'm not sure it's a more compelling points deck than just playing Zoo. And I just keep ending up in these spots where it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with Ravonna right now. I know she's pretty powerful, But I don't know if we're better at doing points. If we're only going to be a points deck, I don't think we're better at doing that than Zoo. And we don't get to have to be an interaction deck. Like I'm kind of shocked. Like I expected her to end up being still good, but I kind of feel like all her decks are very mid right now. And Profex Cannonball was carrying her a lot more than I think we thought.
Yeah, so Profex Cannonball was so-called the auto-win condition of that deck, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like when you get that setup, you usually win. Now, okay, so what exactly I've been doing with this, because I've been experimenting with Ravonna, Dina, good cards deck as well. And what
Yeah.
exactly I was doing was exactly what you said, was I literally just swapped Cannonball for Iron Man, actually.
Yeah.
I swapped it for Iron Man. The prof is gone as well. I swapped it for Iron Man, so I'm playing it more like old bounce, whereby old
Yeah.
bounce has like Angela, small stuff, Iron Man, and then stuff on the final turn. Yeah, I'm doing that right now. Which the funny thing is, it's actually not enough points. Like, so your
Yes.
point was, yeah. So your point about Zoo being more points overall than it is actually to me correct as well. Because when I was testing it, I realized that the Iron Man, for what it's worth, was a very good addition. By the
Mhm.
way, like if not for the fact that Zoo is a thing now, this like Iron Man Ravonna version actually makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
But like the problem is that it doesn't have the mileage of like all bounds. Like it's not just Iron Man and then like play a lot of stuff. Like you actually don't get to play a lot of stuff because your Tina actually only restricts you kind of to play two things on the final turn. So you can't just like Iron Man and just like play a lot of things on the final turn. It doesn't really work that way. There's like no bishop as well, so to scale with like playing a lot of stuff. So like the deck's a bit more restricted than what I thought it would be with Iron Man bounce in the past. So yeah, losing the prof was really huge because like with just that little bit of Tina and Angela scaling and a lane locked out by prof, it was enough to win, correct? But the thing is now there's no turn 4 profs reduced by Ravonna. So like I mean you can still play prof, but you wouldn't really need, and you can't exactly play Ravonna with prof, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
actually need a Ravonna to play prof. So like you can play prof, but then we ask the question of why Ravonna then? Like no real point to play Ravonna because it doesn't work with the prof. So yeah. I agree though. Ravonna decks, to my surprise, to my legitimate surprise, I thought it could be a good points deck, but I guess Zoo does it better.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. Like I haven't found a good one. I just haven't done it. And I've tried, and I just haven't ever found one that I'm like, "Oh, I'm actually happy with this." Maybe it exists. Maybe I'm just like maybe we just haven't gotten to it yet. Maybe it's just like the kind of shell that we have to customize to a metagame, and the metagame's too open. I don't know. But I was very surprised to feel like this is just such a strong core. Let's take it into the new meta, and then just like get run over by people playing Squirrel Girl. Like, finally, I want to talk about a bit of a pet deck of mine, and that is Pixie. If, as I was worried about, we are entering a Loki meta or a Loki slash Hela meta, the last time we had a Loki slash Hela meta, Pixie Mobius was just a great way to deal with both of those things. Pixie Mobius gives you an explosive power output, or the potential for an explosive power output, that can match something like Hela, but it also gives you the ability to just use Mobius as an anti-Loki tool. And I think that that is something that a lot of people sort of forget, is how I would put it. Like, Pixie Mobius is so often an extremely powerful thing to do in Loki metas because of just how good it is to have your own explosive combo. Half of that combo is a tech card that just says, I beat Loki on it. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on Pixie generally, because one of the things I've been thinking about lately is I had Glenn Jones on here and he was like, we kind of want to buff her. And at the time, she was very good. Do you think they could make Pixie a 2/3?
Honestly, yeah, they could actually make Pixie a 2-3. Like, I actually think she needs buff, to be honest. Like, I don't find Pixie decks to be that good. I find Mobius to be good, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I find Mobius as a card to be really good into Loki right now and a few other things as well. But like, and yeah, but I don't find Pixie to be actually that consistent to me. Like, you slam her on turn 2, like the amount of times okay, so I feel like the amount of times that you get that god roll of like one cost, I don't know, Blue Marvel or like something really insane to spam on turn 6 actually doesn't really happen that often. Like I'm saying this because I've started playing some Pixie decks to test as well. Like during the Conquerors like period, I was actually experimenting with Pixie related stuff with Gilgamesh as
Yeah.
well. And I played like so many games, and with that amount of sample size, actually, I didn't actually come into many situations where I had like the absurd Pixie hero. So I feel like even Pixie on 2 is like marginally, I give you like maybe one good like reduction on average, and that's like if you play Pixie on turn 2. So I think the Pixie card itself could be actually buffed to make it feel less bad to play on turn 2, right? Like if it's a 2-3, you don't actually feel so bad about playing it on curve. Like Pixie on curve is like now 2-1, it's like not great. Like it doesn't feel really good because the high rolls you get from her aren't consistently good enough, or like it doesn't really happen that often. So yeah, I do really think that you could buff Pixie. But I just want to go back again to Mobius, which is like, yeah, if Loki is really the thing to do right now, even if it's not Loki, by the way, Mockingbird. If Mockingbird is the thing to do right now, which is the thing to do right now, Mobius. Mobius for sure.
Mobius. And on that, oh wow, it's time to end. Thank you so much for making it through this video. I have been KM Best. He has been Lamby Series. We have been 8 Cubes, and he's gonna take ya out.
Thank you so much for being here once again. Like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one on my channel. Bye bye.